really, I am very happy to be here. 1 year ago, Trinidad was not in my plans. When I got a message from my superiors to go out to Peru, Trinidad and Tobago was not on the list. And suddenly, things happen. God has his plans. And I came here. In 1 week, I got the flight tickets and they said, you should be there next Monday. And yeah, I'm here, very glad to be here and share with you in this beautiful my new home. Well, So, my presentation is about the Dominican saints and the Dominican order in the history of my country, Peru. The Dominican order played a leading role in the history of Peru. So I repeat, the Dominican order played a leading role in the history of Peru. They arrived with the Spanish conquerors, expanding the Catholic religion. The first well-known Dominican was Fray Vicente Valverde, but I will talk about him later. Santa Rosa and San Martin are not only historical figures who contributed with their life and work to forge the history of Peru, and I'm referring to their spiritual and religious history, because from a teleological point of view, the arrival of the Spanish in Peru and in the Americas implied a spiritual desire to build a new Jerusalem in the New World. In the face of a Europe that at that time was bleeding to death in religious wars, trade routes closed by Turkish expansionism, and the rise of the nation-states, the Americas emerged as a hope for planting true faith, safe doctrine, and therefore God's plan. But let's talk about Rosa and Martin to begin our dialogue. When I was a child, long time ago, I heard stories of the dog, the cat, and the mouse at home. And the pictures of San Martin always had that image. And at school we read and recreate those stories, and always like the mosquitoes of Santa Rosa. Technology and I. Yes. Dog, mouse, and cat, the friends of San Martin. These are comic books that we as kids read at school or got them as gifts from family members. So we know the stories of San Martin and Santa Rosa because of this type of thing. This is another story, Santa Rosa's Rooster. But we will talk about that. In the second half of the 19th century, a Peruvian writer named Ricardo Palma decided to compile founding stories of the relatively young Republic of Peru. Palma went through public and private libraries, archives, and conducted interviews with different persons, many of whom lived through the painful transition from the viceroyalty to the Republic of Peru. Palma's main motivation was to create a national identity with short stories that ended with a moral lesson or possible and sometimes funny understanding of the events that were taking place at that time. This is how the Peruvian traditions were born. And Palma dedicated several of them to Peruvian saints, canonized or not. And certainly Rosa and Martin had the leading role. These stories were adapted for children, as I showed you before, and in this way contribute to the knowledge and affection towards both characters who belonged to the order of preachers founded by Domingo de Guzman. I told you about Father Valverde, who was the chaplain of the troop of Francisco Pizarro, and Father Valverde, a Dominican, was the first Spaniard to have an encounter with an Inca sovereign, with the Inca emperor. Valverde was the first bishop of South America, assuming the diocese of Cusco, and dying as a victim of the indigenous people of the island of Puna in Guayaquil, Ecuador. This picture is a drawing made by a chronist called Guamán Poma de Ayala. And Guamán made drawings about the history of the contest and sent it to the King Philip as a gift. And also for showing him how was the conquest of the Americans. And this image represents the encounter of Fray Valverde with the Emperor Atahualpa. Yeah. Okay. And this is a portrait of Father Valverde as Bishop of Cusco. Yeah. Next one, please. The first Archbishop of Lima, the City of Kings, was also Dominican. Fray Jerónimo de Loaiza assumed the archdiocese in 1548 and is remembered for being an excellent mediator during the war's Cold Power, contributing to the pacifications of the territories in South America. He also convened the first Council of Lima, parallel to the Council of Trento, to address the issue of evangelization of the indigenous people. Later, he convened the Second Council to address the dissemination of doctrine and the sacraments. He was a benefactor of the city, building the first hospital. Next one, please. The first hospital, which today bears its name, Arzobispo Loaiza. He also supported Fray Tomás de San Martín, next one, in building the first University of the Americas under the patronage of the evangelist Saint Mark. And this is the university.
That still exists.
Yes, now it's the cultural center of the university. I studied there. I'm very proud of my university. Next one, please. The first Dominican community in Lima was the convent of the Most Holy Rosary, and this is the tower of the church. The church was very close, still now very close, to the Viceroy House, now the Presidential Palace, the main square, and the cathedral. Next one, please. Oh, this is right, Thomas. Next one. So you have another view of the tower. Next one. This is the entrance of the church. This one. And you can see here a map, and the tower of the Dominican church is here, and the main square of Lima, the cathedral right there, the governor palace, that one. And the church in the corner, no, that one is the Desamparados, Our Lady of Hopeless, and that one is San Francis. San Francis the Main. The cloisters, the Dominican cloisters, will see the first fruits of holiness of the Americas flourish, who live the love of God and neighbor to the limit. Rosa de Santa Maria, Santa Cruz of Lima, Martín de Porres, and Juan Macias. Yes. This is Our Lady of the Rosary of the Spanish. It's the main Virgin of the convent. Next one. And this is the altar of the Dominican saints. Martin, I took this picture last year during the San Martin. He saw his image, his statue was in front of the altar, in the middle of Santa Rosa, and San Juan Macias, John Macias, is the left side. And the relics are there. San Dominic. The entrance to the cloister. And we have this window with the three Peruvian Dominican saints. Next one, please. This is now the house of Santa Rosa de Lima, Santa Rosa Convent. It's known as Santa Rosa de los Padres, Santa Rosa of the Friars, because the Dominican community live there now. And there's another convent called Santa Rosa de las Monjas, Santa Rosa of Nuns, which is a cloistered monastery. Rosa de Lima was born as Isabel Flores de Oliva in 1586. She was part of the Creole family. And Creoles are the Spaniards born in America or Spanish Americans. Her father worked in various positions for the government administration, and her mother was dedicated herself to housework. The family wanted a good marriage for her daughter. Rosa wanted to enter the convent. At that time, there were only 3 female convents in Lima: the Franciscan Conceptionists, the Benedictines, and the Agustinians. There were no Dominican nuns at the time. But God had another path for her. The first miracle was her name change. The maid who looked after her saw that her face took the shape of a rose, and from then they decided to change her name. Rosa was confirmed by the second Archbishop of Lima, who also became a saint, Toribio de Mogrovejo. And it was there that she decided to consecrate herself to God and change her name to Rosa de Santa Maria. Next one. The impossibility of entering the convent was not an obstacle for Rosa to discover the will of God in the midst of the world. Rosa contributed to the formation of a new way of living the religion, not in cluster, but in everyday life, as a beata. The exact translation is blessed, that is not the exactly concept. Beata was a woman who lived at her home, sometimes in a community with other women in the same position. They were independent and they follow a rule, a as laypersons. So, Rosa was a woman consecrated in poverty, chastity, and obedience, but lived her own house, practiced the rule of life, in this case, the rule of San Dominic, and obviously had a prayer time, did penance, and practiced the charity. This fact meant that, on the one hand, her family did not understand her, right? And on the other hand, that she had many followers. Rosa walked every day the route from her house to the convent, where she attended Mass, prayed the Rosary, and practiced charity. Later, she worked sewing, cooking, and growing her garden, helping with the family finances. All of this was framing in a life of intense prayer and penance. Her intimate encounter with God led her to have mystical visions, especially with the child Jesus, as we see in this painting, whom she affectionately called the little doctor, el doctorcito, a doctor of wisdom and for the cure of souls. Souls that include her own family misunderstandings, the doctrinal deviation of some of her followers, which led to a process before the Inquisition. The suffering for the sins of the world led her to establish conversations with the child. She played with him, walked through the garden, talked about the things of God, and was able to resist, thanks to her ascetic life, the attacks of the devil, who will not allow her to flourish. This is a painting of Rosa Penance, carry on the cross. But thank you. Well, this picture, you can see Rosa doing penance, carrying the cross. And I would like to pay attention to that picture. The one before. Yes. The one with the garden. Yes. Yes, just pay attention of the type, of the shape of this garden, right? You'll see something like that. Next one, please. Well, Rosa has also a mystical marriage with Jesus Christ. And I like this painting because it represents Virgin Mary as La Divina Pastora, but the Spanish devotion of La Divina Pastora. Next one, please. Rosa was known as the defender of the city of Lima. In the face of an attack by Dutch pirates, she went to protect the Holy Sacrament, to increase prayer, and to encourage the population to defend the capital. The prayers were successful, as the pirates moved away from the capital due, let's say, strange bad weather. Next one, please. Rosa died at the age of 31 in 1617. Her gift of prophecy saw the establishment of Dominican convents. The convent of Santa Catalina, St. Catherine, was founded by her mother. And in the house of her godfather, where she died, the convent of Santa Rosa of the Nuns was established. Next one, please. Oops. This is the Ecstasies of Santa Rosa by Melchiorre Caffa. Was donated by Pope Clemens for her beatification, and this statue is now in the convent of the Rosary in Lima. I don't know if you can see some similarities with the Ecstasies of Santa Teresa. Have you ever seen the statue of Bernini? Yes, it's similar. Next one. This painting represents the funerals of Santa Rosa. Her body was a procession, and the authorities, political, administrative, military, church authorities, and all the people of Lima attended the funeral. And they also wanted the relics because they considered her as a saint. Her funeral, as I told you, was apotheosis, and her faith for sanctity immediately gave rise to the process of her beatification, which ended in 1667, very fast for that time. Hundreds of witnesses from all levels, groups of the society, gave their testimony about her life of sanctity. In 1671, she was canonized, being the first American to reach the altars. The Spanish monarchy fulfilled its duty to evangelize the New World. The church was filled with hope. The Americans saw in Santa Rosa an example of a spiritual progress and autonomy, and the Dominican order harvested the first fruit of the most fragrant flower of the garden the order cultivated. This garden has a lot of mysticism. Next one, please. Next one. Do you remember the picture you saw Santa Rosa carry on the cross? The garden, as I told you, has a lot of mysticism. It's the Garden of the Eden and the Garden of the Resurrection, where Jesus Christ appeared to Mary Magdalene. Recently, during some preparing works, these paintings have been discovered that represent these spaces, this special garden of contemplation. These paintings are in the house of Santa Rosa, and they were discovered 2 years ago. Next one, please. She made also some mercies or graces, where she wrote, this is the letter of Santa Rosa. The writing of Santa Rosa. Where she wrote her spiritual itinerary so that her heart will be one with that of Jesus Christ. So, Rosa Linensis, Rosa de Lima, is also a mystical rose. And now we will talk about Martín de la Caridad of San Martin, the charity Martin de Porres. Martin was a mulatto who was born in the city of Lima in 1579. In this case, well, the father is black and the mother is white, but in the case of San Martin, his father was a nobleman, Spanish, dedicated to government work, and his mother was a free slave. The house of Porres and Velázquez was next to the house of Santa Rosa. Next one, please. This is the house of San Martin, but this statue is in the garden of the house of Santa Rosa. So they were neighbors. They were contemporaries, as well as brother of congregation. Martin learned work as herbalist, apothecary, nurse, and barber in Lima and Guayaquil. And he was always eager to learn and to spread what he learned to others. His desire to be a priest was cut short by belonging to the racial group called castas. He was part of this black group. And this is why he entered the convent of El Rosario as a donado, serving as a porter, nurse, serving at the kitchen, in all the jobs that were hardest, least demanding, and of low level. But Martin always did them with patience, humility, and smile. This is the house of St. Martin, and the chapel now was his bedroom, the place that he performed. Next one, please. And now the house is a social work of the House of San Martin de Porres, belonging to the Dominican lay order. And this is the chapel inside. This was St. Martin's bedroom. And this is a map of Lima. But it's interesting because it's a map of the early 18th century where the Santa Rosa period was signed at that time. Bishop Toribio de Mogrovejo was signed at the time. And the first sign at that time was Francisco Solano, a Franciscan friar, who was also contemporary of all of them. And St. John Evangelist is the patron of Lima and one of the patrons of the cathedral. But you can see that Lima was surrounded by walls, right? And far outside of these walls, some orders decided to build recollection convents. So the Dominicans, the Our Lady of Mercy, the Franciscans, and the Augustinians had convents outside the walls for recollection, for living a strict life, following their rules in a very, very, let's say, true and hard way. So Martin was wanderer and traveled around the city you see, to practice the charity, distributing food, healing the sick, caring for the helpless. He went outside the city walls to visit the Dominican recollection of Mary Magdalene, where his Dominican brother, Juan Macias, lived, with whom he held spiritual discussions and community prayer. You can see here a painting of San Martin de Porres and San Juan Macias. Next one. This is now the Church of La Recoleta, Recollection Church now. And this is the main altar. This is the convent of the Rosary. And you can see here St. Martin practicing the charity. Martin endured the indifference, mistreatment, and discrimination typical of his time, even from his brother in the community. And he endured all this with patience, with kindness, because his lack of prayer led him to live the wisdom of the cross. On the cross and in Christ's sacrifice, the sins of the world are carried, but the hope of the resurrection is also given, and every yoke is bearable. Next one, please. He tasted in his own flesh and returned sweetness and charity. He achieved conversion and transformation of character. He felt that God's love encompassed all creation, and this was manifested in the sin of the dog, the cat, and the mouse, which is not only a symbol of what we would call today tolerance or inclusion, but above all, of sharing bread, of sharing Christ, and of being united in Him. Next one. This is a print when Martin was venerable. It's a print of 18th century and represents him with a broom. And in the nursery. And this is a prayer card after his beatification and represents him also in his cell with the broom, the dog, the cat, the mouse, and his carry on the bread. But I want to talk also to other Dominicans. The Dominican holiness continued to bear fruit in Peru and was always attentive to the signs of the times. Contemporary with Rosa and Martin, but in a Dominican convent in the city of Arequipa in the south of Peru, a prioress, Mother Ángeles Monteagudo y Ponce de León, prayed for the sanctification of the third most important city of Peru. This is the convent of Santa Catalina, St. Catherine, where Mother Ángeles was prioress. Next one. The entrance, silence, and one of the entrance of the convent. Centuries later, in 1918, when the Amazon region gained importance and national boundaries were being consolidated, a group of women, under the leadership of Mother Ascension Nicole, founded the congregation of the Dominicans of the Rosary in Madre de Dios, in the middle of the Peruvian jungle. Mother Ángeles and Mother Ascension are now blessed by the Catholic Church. And years later, Father Jose Alvarez, now known as Apactone in the indigenous language, the Shipibo language, means the good old father, dedicated his life to the defense of the natives, and today he is on his way to the altars. Father Apactone, doing his missionary work. Well, holiness is just around the corner, but it requires a commitment on our path. You can see in this painting a representation of heaven with many Dominican saints. Saint Dominic, Saint Juan Macias, and Martin de Porres, and Saint Catherine. Following Christ is not easy, but we must know how to live the demands of everyday life. If we trust in God and place our confidence in Him, if we follow His teachings and live the gospel, if we seek the truth, make this true life and bring it to the others, if we are faithful in the small things, following the example of Rosa, next one, or Martin, if we fill ourselves with the love of God towards Him and towards others, I believe that the buzzing of the mosquitoes will be part of a harmonious peace. The roses will blow to where one least imagine, or the dog, the cat, and the mouse will eat from the same plate and recognize each other as brothers and children of the same Father. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's very helpful to have the pictures as well to at least give us a sense of the place. If anybody has questions for Daniel, if anything has come up that you'd like to ask him, we can.
Daniel, you have emphasized and you gave out a card for the feast of St. Martin yesterday, a prayer card, and in it you spoke about the dog, the mouse,
And the cat.
and the cat. Are you kind of suggesting that here at St. Fitbar's, the Dominicans should have dogs and cats and mice eating from the same plate?
Well, I think in the Dominican convent during St. Martin's time, I say that there were dogs and cats and mouse in this convent.
So we're missing something here.
Well, I don't know, I don't live in the community But
Because we have one dog, no cat, and maybe there are mice around, but I haven't seen them yet. But if you invite them, they may start coming, and Martin isn't around.
yeah, but
So we won't know what to do.
yeah, but
We do have snakes. I had a snake in my bedroom.
yes, I have one visit you. Well, I think that this image of the cat, the dog, and the mouse is very tender, but at the same time represent that all of us are creatures of God, and we can live together. All of us have differences, and sometimes people are a bit sensitive, so we need St. Martin who reconciles all of us and take us to the good way.
In Trinidad, we have an expression that we are not to live like dogs and cats. Always at each other's throats. We have to be more compassionate and tender and kind. So this is Martin for us. I think Martin is a tremendous figure for us in our part of the world. You referred to him as a mulatto, so he can blend with our society of the mixed races. You also spoke of him as black. We could identify with him because of his color. And also, he is, an expression of so many of our peoples in our region of mixed races and that. And we live in harmony. We live well with each other. We accept each other, Even though sometimes racism kind of lifts up its head and kind of want to confuse us a little bit, but I think deep down inside of us we want something better than that, and we want to live well with each other. I think Martin could teach us how to do that.
Yes, I think that Martin didn't believe in borderlines, boundaries, or limits. Neither these limits of his convent, or the walls of Lima, or human divisions, or creature divisions. Because he recognized himself as a creature, as a son of God. And that reminds me something that I've heard, because people usually think why St. Martin de Porres was beatified 200 years after his death and 130 years after his beatification was canonized, right? He was beatified in 1937 and was canonized in 1962. And I was thinking about that because the simple answer that I found was because his color, right? But for me, it's just a superficial answer. I just want to share a question that was in my mind. Perhaps it's a coincidence that his beatification in 1837 occurred in the midst of the emancipatory movements from slavery in the Americas. Perhaps his canonization was made during the Second Vatican Council. Is there any relation with these big events and the presence of this humble saint? And after thinking that, the only answer I got is that God's time are not our times.
And also, Daniel, just to say that twice his canonization papers were sent across the ocean, and both times the ships had sunk. So there were timed efforts for him to be canonized earlier, but due to war disruption too, they were on both times after they had organized everything.
They organized.
I have a question for you, Daniel. Is there, besides the cat and the dog and the earlier on. Is there a story from St. Martin's life that you love?
Well, I heard a story that he attended and served poor people and sick people at the entrance of the convent, and the friars were not too convinced to get all these people, especially for the yeast and all this sickness during the time. And the prior said that it was avoided to do that. And suddenly he found someone, an indigenous person, who was very, very bad. And he took him inside the convent and took care of him in his own place, in his own room, until this person was good. And the prior knew that, and he punished him very bad. And he accepted that in silence, with patience. And when he asked him why he did that, he said that obedience is important, but most important is charity. I don't know if you've heard that.
As he said, charity is the supreme rule.
Yes.
So in charity knows when to break the rules.
Yes, and there are other stories about donkey and a bull, or the brown sugar washed in the fountain of the convent and turned it into white sugar because the prior wanted white sugar. Things like that. Yeah. But they were interesting stories that Ricardo Palmas, I told you, recopilated in the Peruvian traditions. All the encounters with Martin and Rosa, Martin and Juan Macias, or the presence of Francisco Solano. And there were another Franciscan friar, Juan Gomez, who has a story with Scorpion. But it was very, very, let's say, deep stories with teachings, with moral teachings, and it was a very, very good way for, let's say, my generation of kids that know that stories and read them. And also we represent them in theater plays, because they are very, very easy to do. Right.
Question?
Yep.
Yes, good evening. Okay, so you worked in the convent, but did he ever become a brother or anything like that? What was his Dominican order? What was he?
Well, he made his vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but he couldn't be a priest. He was neither a friar. He entered as donados, donated, so he was a servant in the convent. And it's interesting because there are two other facts that Santa Rosa was beatified very fast. But the Pope gave the permission for her public cult before she was saint. And the same was with Martin. The Pope gave a permission to Irish priests to build and establish a parish in Lima, Blessed St. Martin Porres.
Wow.
In a district which name is St. Martin Porres. Any other question? Yes.
Yeah, you said that in his chapel,
Yeah.
they have his remains or his relics. Is
His
it
relics,
his
yes.
remains or is
Yes,
it just...
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. In the chapel, the bones of Santa Rosa, San Martin, and San Amasias are down the altar. Yeah.
He's not in crowd. Is that
Vipassana?
Yeah.
You have a story.
Hi, it's a real story. It concerns me. As a child growing up, we were taught to use St. Martin as our intercessor for the sick and for the poor, right?
Yes.
That's what we represent. And I was an epileptic from age about between 5, 6, around there. And my last seizure was at age 13. And I always testify it was because my mother told me, and I know she used to pray too. And in those days, he was a big saint in Trinidad. Just as how we have others who St. John Paul II would be for them now and all that. In the old time days, you would hear about saints like St. Francis, St. Martin de Porres, St. Anthony, and they would tell you what to use them for. Okay? So as I said, he was for the poor and the sick. And my mother used to pray to him, use him as intercessor, pray to Jesus for my healing. And the strange thing about it is, being an epileptic, you could get a seizure at any time. I never got a seizure except when I was asleep. And as I went into it, I would say one word, it would come up, Mommy, and the whole household would know to come, what was happening. And anyway, this went on. And at age 13, we moved into Port of Spain. I'm an Armenian, so I know about Santa Rosa, it's my church, Marima. I was christened there, made first communion and all that. But then, to cut a long story short, at age 13, we moved into Port of Spain to live. But I couldn't move into Port of Spain as yet, because I was in Form 1 at St. Joseph Convent in Arima. And I had to finish the year there because I could not get a transfer to a school down here. And one day, when I stayed with my grandmother and all that, during the week to go to school. And in her home, at 6 o'clock every evening, you would have to stop whatever you were doing to say the rosary. And we had just finished saying the rosary that evening. And I went into my bedroom. I was somewhere on the dresser, doing whatever. Now remember, I never ever got a seizure when I was, like, say, walking around or anything like that. And I suddenly felt strange, but my mother had always told me, there's a novena, there's a booklet to him with the novena. She would say it, she would always use him as an intercessor. She taught me to pray to him, asking him to ask Jesus to heal me. And that day in question, it came on, and I started to realize what was happening. And I just started to pray and call on him, and to call on him, and in Jesus as well. But I said, St. Martin, intercede to me. No, my mother is not here to take care of me. My grandmother, my poor grandmother, and my aunt would not know what to do and what not. And I just had mindset to put myself on the bed in the middle of that if when I foot went fully into it. but I started to pray and hold, and that was my last seizure. I am 66 years of age now, and that is why St. Martin de Porres he is so dear to me. Every time I'm at Mass, there after Mass, I make my rounds in the church, and I go to him, St. Jude is next to him, I go, and I pray, and I thank, and I use him as an intercessor for when I'm praying for the sick, because I myself am an intercessor. So I use him all times, different ones, like Satan's needle will tell you, for to find things if you lose them. And, you know, he's for the sick and poor, so I use him a lot for healing of the sick when people ask me to pray and so. This is just basically.
Thank you.
So on that note, we'll bring the evening to an end because it's already past. And just want to thank you so much, Daniel, for taking the time to come out to us. To give us something to do. Okay, we just close with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Through the intercession of St. Martin de Porres, St. Rose of Lima, St. Juan Macias, and all the great saints of the Dominican Order, we ask a blessing to be upon us, that our hearts be burned with that love for God that Martin had, and Rose had. That complete dedication, love for God and love for others, to see God in each other, and to serve Christ in each other. May the Lord bless us, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you.
That'd be great, yeah. Anyone, you want? That's all right. We'll put you on either side. Johnny. That's okay. You can meet with Johnny and he can bring you up. 6:30.